How can I come up with a reasonable price point for either selling a house or buying a house that's not based on a shot in the dark? And because of my investors, I developed the ARV algorithm. Basically said, what would this property be worth if it was in move-in condition? Not necessarily totally renovated, but marketable.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, where great minds in real estate get together.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. I am your host, Angelina Canelli. In this industry, everyone talks about the market, but very few people talk about the science of winning it. Today, I'm joined by Cifrodelli, a man who is literally redefining the search. He is the owner of Sweet Spot Real Estate, a firm built on the principle of value optimization and a persistent 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. service standard. He doesn't just find the houses, he finds a sweet spot where lifestyle meets financial genius. Welcome to the show, Drew.
Well, thank you. Very good intro. I appreciate it.
So, Drew, you founded Sweet Spot Real Estate with a very specific branding in mind. In a market full of legacy names, what does defining a sweet spot actually mean for a buyer in today's volatile economy?
Well, one of the things that was apparent to me when I came into the industry, I was licensed in 1985, but I didn't really come in full time until the 2000s. And so when I came from a data analysis background. I was a data analyst at Princeton University. And so I looked at this industry and I thought to myself that, it just seems like this idea of taking 3 comps was terribly inefficient. And a lot of times you couldn't even find 3 comps in a market that were similar to the price similar to the house that your client was trying to buy or trying to sell. I have another way of figuring out what the value was of the property. And I very quickly hit a point in my career where the mortgage meltdown occurred. And at that point in time, they were asking brokers to do broker price opinions. And to find 3 comps in the market at that time was impossible. And you were supposed to find them within a half a mile. You're supposed to, they had all this criteria and you could never meet it. So that really pushed me over the edge to say, okay, how can I come up with a reasonable price point for either selling a house or buying a house that's not based on a shot in the dark? And because of my investors, I developed the ARV algorithm. Basically said, what would this property be worth if it was in move-in condition? Not necessarily totally renovated, but marketable. Give me a marketable property, roof doesn't leak, the windows open and close, the doors open and shut, the plumbing works, the electric works, it'll get so they can get a mortgage. And through that and through dealing with a bunch of estates, I developed the Sweet Spot algorithm to go through and figure out, okay, we've got a house here. Somebody lived in it the last 10 years of their life. They didn't take care of it. The heirs are looking to maximize the value of the property, but they don't really have a lot of money to put into it. The state might not have any money to put into it at all. So how do you take a property that's been neglected for the last 10 years and get it marketable? And what should it be sold for? And what's the price per square foot in a certain market? And so I developed this whole system, and you can see in the background on my screen, that's a typical buyer demand curve, right? So as you go up, it eventually hits a steep decline because you're reaching the max of somebody's mortgage capability or whatever cash they have to spend. And that cliff, a lot of people like to price out at the end of the cliff. And when you do that, you cut out too many buyers and you end up not getting any competitive bidding. And when you don't have competitive bidding, then you get buyers that are pretty picky. They start to bother you on inspection items and they don't behave very well. So if you can keep your price closer to the peak of that curve, you end up with a lot of buyers and a lot of competition. And then you get well-behaved buyers that don't really do much for an inspection because they're happy that they got a house. They close when you need them to close. They have better terms and conditions on their deals. So all these things, really came together. And when I first was in the industry, I worked primarily as a buyer's agent. So I teamed up with a listing agent that was so busy that she couldn't handle taking buyers out. So I got to really understand buyers and how they behave, what they look for, the restrictions that cause a property to go for the highest amount, possible. And so I took that and I made it into a system but I flipped it so that it was more seller oriented. How do we get the price into that spot on the curve to get that kind of a reaction from the buyers so that they fight over the property? And
Interesting. And so does this logic apply to a specific state, or is this just like a universal kind of rule that you can apply across all the states here in the United States?
so it works really well in areas where people are getting a mortgage. So as long as it's competitive in that way, where most of your buyers are coming to the table and they're financing the property, then it works very well. If you're in a market like, let's say right now I'm in the Jersey Shore area, that's a lot more cash buyers. It's a lot more second home buyers. It's a lot more investors buying for, different reasons. So it doesn't work as well in that regard, but I've modified the model to handle that kind of situation as well. Because when you're dealing with income properties, then you can use a DSCR calculation, or debt
Hmm.
service ratio calculation, right? So you can look at the cash flow, that revenue that's going to come in. You can deduct out the expenses that you're going to have.
Yeah.
You have a certain amount of money that's left over, and that's the money that you have to pay debt. So if you say, oh, well, I have $1,000 a month left over, and if I wanted to use all of that on a loan, well, how much money can I borrow at the current interest rates for a commercial loan? And you very quickly come up with, all right, well, a commercial loan needs 20% or 25% down plus whatever I can borrow,
Hmm.
and you've got a max purchase price. Well, does any investor really want to pay max purchase price? Probably not, right? But at least you have a ceiling. So a lot of what I do is about creating ceilings and floors. So I know what the ceiling price is, and then I can guess what the floor price is, and then I can give people an idea where that sweet spot is, where you're somewhere in the middle between the ceiling and the floor, where you're going to get the kind of activity that you're looking for.
I see. That's very informative. Thank you. So, your team is available 16 hours a day, and that's very impressive. In an industry known for flexible hours, how does that level of accessibility change the outcome for a client during a bidding war?
Hmm. Well, so in order to reach that level of service, I have to have assistants, right?
Mhm.
So I have virtual assistants that monitor my inbox, and then I have virtual assistants that do some of the because I've codified this so that it can be done over and over again repeatedly. So at this point, I've even used AI to basically create modules that my assistant can use, run it through, and then I get to read what the AI came up with. If I see anything that the AI missed, then I throw in some more variables and let the AI come back with, following my model. So that's helped me a lot recently in streamlining the approach and making sure that it's repeatable and fast.
That's pretty impressive. So, essentially, you're just perfectioning the model, fitting with new data, new information. That's great. So, you talk about a lot about value optimization. For a seller who thinks their home is already perfect, what is the one hidden tweak that usually yields the highest return on investment before hitting the market?
The easiest, so I look at things in terms of return on investment. So how much money or time are you going to spend trying to get some extra money for the value of the house? And the cheapest thing that you can do to any house is declutter. So, if I come into a house that has too much stuff, we just take some of the stuff and we put it in the garage. It's really funny when you work with buyers, you realize that seldom do they even look in the garage. Or they'll open the door, they'll look in, and they'll go, oh yeah, there's a garage, and they close the door. And from a guy's point of view, there's a garage, I can do anything I want with it. From a woman's point of view, she puts her car in it. I'm generalizing here a bit, but it's funny how very few people actually spend any time looking in the garage. So we take any of the extra extraneous furniture, or what I like to do is say to them, you're moving, so start packing. Right? If it's summer, pack up all your winter stuff, get it out of here, get it in the garage. And when buyers see packed boxes in the garage, that actually is an incentive for them, because they look at that and they think to themselves, oh, this seller is serious. This seller wants to sell. Now, a lot of people think that's counterintuitive, but when you go out with buyers a lot, you realize that the buyer who's going to pay you more money for your house than anyone is the buyer whose house is already sold, right? You don't want to miss those buyers. If you're the seller, you have to make sure that you're priced within the sweet spot and that you're making it possible for those sellers to get in, and you got to make it look like they could close quickly when they need to. When they find that house that they can close on, it meets their minimum requirements, and they know you're serious, they're going to bid high. When I'm on the seller side, I don't take my houses off the market unless they've been on the market for 2 weeks, maybe 3, depending on how long I can get my clients to wait. Because, sometimes they're like, oh, that's a good price. Let's go. Let's take it. And I make an agreement with them early on. Let me do at least 2 weeks of marketing to make sure we get all the showings so that we know everybody's got a chance to see it. One of the biggest pushbacks I get is from the agents who are worried that either A, I have a pocket deal and I'm trying to double end the deal, in which case, that's not right to do to them. And the other thing is they want to make sure that they're going to have a fair shot of getting the best offer on the table. So I make sure that I tell all the buyer's agents, we're marketing the property for 2 weeks. I appreciate your offer. We're not ready to take the property off the market. We've got 5 showings lined up or 7 showings lined up for the weekend. I tell them, look, we've got 5 or 7 showings lined up for the weekend. Everybody's going to get a fair shot at this. I'm going to make sure that I come back to you. You're not going to miss your opportunity. And what I find that most of the buyers do in that case is they up their bid without me even asking. I don't even have to do anything except for make them wait.
Wow, that's really impressive because it doesn't happen in Florida, trust me, especially now.
All right. Well, yeah, so Florida went through a bubble, right? But even in 2006, 2008 timeframe when we hit the last bubble, what I noticed at that point in time was if you had a move-in condition house and you were ready to move, there were still buyers out there that needed a move-in condition house that they could close on. There were plenty of houses out there that were underwater, in disrepair, couldn't really be sold for their asking price, needed bank approval or some third-party approval. And when you got down to the number of houses that could actually be sold to an owner occupant that were in move-in condition, there weren't that many. So I don't know what it's like in Florida right now, but I'm guessing that if they were experiencing a bubble, there's probably a lot of houses on the market right now that are underwater.
That could be an option, yes.
And if they are, that's going to make them hard to sell.
I agree. So we're seeing a massive shift towards automation data, and you did mention that earlier. So how do you use AI tools helping everyday investors or homeowners predict market shifts before they happen?
Before they happen. I wouldn't say that I do a lot in the preemptive before they happen kind of a space. I'm looking more at, price per square foot, trends. I do look at how many houses are on the market in the, so what you might say uptake or so if there was 6 houses that sold in the last 6 months and there are 6 houses on the market, then that's generally considered an ebb market where the buyers and the sellers have the same amount of power. But in order to do that properly, you have to eliminate the distressed properties. And that's a big part of what my ARV does. It goes through the MLS and it eliminates all the distressed properties from the calculation and only focuses on marketable properties and what they sold for. And that's a huge differentiator from what I've seen from most models. If you try to price distressed properties against other distressed properties, you never really know what the distress was. Is it toxic mold? Is it termite damage? It could be underground oil tank. There's so many things that could be affecting a distressed property sale that it's hard to even factor in and compare the properties to each other. So you have to go for market rate properties. And that's been my focus, just to eliminate the noise of the distressed property market.
So you've helped people avoid purchasing money pits. What is the weirdest, most instant deal breaker thing that you ever spotted during a home walkthrough that the average person would have missed?
So I'm a little unique in that way. I used to build houses. I used to renovate houses. So I've got a pretty good background in construction. And so one of the things I try to do is make sure that I go into the basement. All right. And I try to get my buyers into the basement because if they like the house, all the expensive stuff, at least in the Northeast, is in the basement. Right? So you can get a look at the plumbing when you go into the basement. You can see the wiring. You can see the foundation. You can kind of pre-inspect for termites. When you've done this long enough, you can see termite damage sometimes. You can see mold. You can see flooding evidence. You can see horizontal cracks in the foundation wall. There's a lot of houses that have vertical cracks. No big deal, really, most of the time. But a horizontal crack is always a big deal. And so then it's a matter of how big a deal is it? Is it a big enough deal that it has to be remedied, or is it just something to keep an eye on? And so that's where I spend a lot of my time with the buyer, really trying to avoid a problem during inspection, because I can say, look, these things are going to come up and they could kill your deal. And if you think that you're going to negotiate money off the sale price of the house during an inspection phase. So if I'm doing business in New York, it's a completely different ballgame. You do all your inspections ahead of time and you don't negotiate price until you can put your offer on, but your inspection is basically informational purposes only. You don't like it, you back out of the deal. You like it, you sign a contract, you close within 2 weeks. New Jersey is almost the complete opposite of that. In New Jersey, we have a buyer, a grace period where the buyer and the seller get an attorney review period. So I write up the contract and it gives them 3 days to have an attorney review it. Then it goes into an inspection period where they've hired their inspector. The inspector looks at the house, finds whatever's wrong with it. They give this gigantic report, usually 34 pages to a minimum, listing all the things that are wrong with the house.
Mhm.
And then you start to negotiate the any of those items that you think need to get repaired. Well, what if the seller says, I'm not doing anything, and kill the deal? You know? Well, that's not good for me. It's not good for my buyer.
Yeah.
It's not good for my seller. So whichever side of this I'm on, if I'm with my seller, I'm taking them into their basement and saying, this is going to come up on your inspection. Be ready for it. Right. And
Mhm.
if I'm with the buyer, I'm doing the same thing. Like, these are going to come up on the inspection. If these are not something you're willing to deal with, let's go look at another house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So essentially educating them.
Yeah. To the best of my ability. I mean, I'm not an inspector,
Mhm.
but I can keep them from putting an offer on a house that's just going to be a waste of time and money.
Makes sense. I want to be your client.
That's
I
great. Thanks.
Of course, if I ever buy in New Jersey, in your area. But yeah,
Excellent.
thank you so much. That's been very interesting. I've learned a lot today, and you really opened up my mind on certain areas that they were not very clear to me when it comes to real estate.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
glad I could do that for you.